News broke of the school shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia, Canadians everywhere are experiencing a whole range of emotions: shock, sadness, and even renewed anxiety about violence in our society. Janine Hubbard is a registered psychologist, and she joins me from St. John's. Hi, Janine.
Hi, Martin.
How would you describe the way that people across the country might be feeling in the aftermath of this tragedy right now?
I think it's a very heavy morning. I think people hugged their kids extra hard last night and are really experiencing just a range of emotions, from sadness and disbelief. There may be some anger, but a lot of it is really a challenge to our worldviews and kind of a loss of innocence in many ways, because we have these foundational beliefs that, well, Canada isn't a place where we have this level of gun violence, and schools are safe here in this country. And this has just really shattered some of those core beliefs for so many of us, that it really is, a collective grief and a collective trauma that's happening across the country today.
I've had several conversations, since this news broke yesterday, and two people said to me, and they prefaced it by saying, I almost feel a bit silly feeling as emotional as I do. Why do you think people feel the need to say that too?
No, I'm so glad you raised that, because that's one of the key messages I want to get out at the moment is, first of all, it was a horrific tragedy in many ways, that a natural human response to that is to feel grief and sadness and confusion and disbelief. Because, there has been, there's no other words for that. But one of the things that we know about trauma is you don't have to have been immediately impacted yourself. It can be a perceived threat. And there are many communities at the moment feeling perceived threat, even if it hasn't been directly toward them. And so one of the things I please encourage, if you are really feeling distressed, talk to your friends and loved ones, reach out, connect. But if you are still really struggling, it's okay to ask for help and say, I know I feel silly about this, because you shouldn't. Listen, last night was very challenging, and I think the days to come are going to be very challenging. And you don't have to have had an immediate family member impacted to be feeling really strong reactions to this.
What advice would you give then for somebody listening right now trying to process how they feel?
I think one of the things is check in with how your mind and body are doing. That sounds kind of silly, but when we hear violent news stories, our brain's alert system kicks in, and it floods us with adrenaline and cortisol. It prepares us to deal with a threat. And that puts our bodies just on overdrive, which makes us feel more anxious. It makes us feel more irritable. It could have sleep issues. I've been doing a lot of deep breathing just to try to keep that in check, and being mindful of, okay, well, what thoughts am I having? And limit your news intake for a little while. I know, unfortunately, that alarm system also makes us seek out information. Use reputable news sources, schedule the time you're going to learn of information, and really be careful about being exposed to news when you're feeling unfiltered and vulnerable.
It's a hard balance, because the messages and the updates are important, and they're coming at us from all angles, kind of thing. So how do you strike that balance there?
I think what you need to do is assess for yourself, how am I feeling after I've checked in? I've looked at the CBC website, or I've listened to the morning news. How am I feeling? Am I feeling a little bit less anxious because I have a few more details and I'm feeling a little less confused, or the pieces are pulling together? Or is that increasing my anxiety? And that's going to look different for everybody.
I want to talk a little bit about young people and the impact that all this could have on them, on children and teens and students. What kind of things and what kind of impact could this be having on them right now?
Huge impact, because, again, we have this belief that school is safe, And what I would encourage is please send your kids to school. Keep them up with the normal routine. And teachers are experiencing this collective grief as well, but there are supports. It may be that classes have discussions together. It may be that they're using guidance counselors and the school psychologists, but the supports are there. Even though your instinct may be hold them tight, because the more we avoid fearful things, the scarier they become. And then in age-appropriate language, provide that reassurance. It's really hard for them to understand just how unusual a situation this is, at least for really little kids. But ask what they know, give them space to ask questions, validate their emotions, and try to help as best you can, provide information in developmentally appropriate levels, and caution your teens around where they're getting their information.
Yeah, seeing a lot of information, some accurate and some not. That's certainly not adding to the dialogue really at all, right?
No, and I think really emphasizing that as hard as it is for all of us, because we want to fill in the blanks, we want to understand how something like this could happen, please let law enforcement, let media do their job of understanding things. And this is a time collectively to come together to grieve, express love, support one another. This is not a time for hate. It's not a time for misinformation. And unfortunately, we know it's going to be out there. That was my biggest fear yesterday morning. So protecting yourself from that as best you can and trying not to engage in it yourself. Let's look for positive acts of kindness and support one another.
Janine, before we say goodbye here, for those people who, as you say, might be feeling anxious, maybe a little less safe doing their normal daily routines now, especially if they're going to school, for example, too, what should they be doing in the next day and days ahead?
Like I say, trying to engage in some self-care, get away from media, get outside if you can. Anything that's going to help regulate your system. So whether that's some exercise, whether that's, taking the dog for a walk, whether that's watching some mindless, silly TV that just helps to distract for a little bit. But just, and like I say, as needed, reaching out, if talking about it to others is helpful, do so. If what you just kind of need is some time and distance from news and time to process, that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. Janine, always appreciate talking to you. Thank you for this. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Martin.